Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching. Clara held her daughter's hand tightly and whispered to her, "Sunshine, tomorrow's the day off in the garden and I have to go to work just for a few hours. You'll be alone." Jessica sighed. Sometimes she had to sit alone. It was a little uncomfortable at first, boring and sometimes scary. And then Jessica started playing kindergarten. Only the tutor was not her, but her dolls. Sometimes the girl was so comfortable in her role that she did not even notice the arrival of her mother. But in such a pastime was a significant disadvantage. She had to clean up all at once. That was the only thing that made the girl sad. Actually, she was an adult. She went to kindergarten for the last year. It's the end of winter, then spring, summer, and school. It was all very exciting, and she and her mother often talked about school. Mom told how she was going to the first grade. Jessica listened with bated breath. After Mom's stories, it wasn't so scary. And little by little, Jessica began to prepare her dolls for school. They teach them in kindergarten. So far, it wasn't going well, because Jessica didn't understand how everything was going. But the game was getting more exciting. "Okay, Mom, of course I will. I bought notebooks for your dolls. Why don't you just teach them in words? You'll show them how to write the letters correctly. Remember, I brought you a copybook. There you are in your notebooks." Clara slyly looked at her daughter. More than anything else, Jessica did not like to write. She looked at her mother doubtfully. The girl felt there was a catch, but what was a catch? But what was it? Her mother looked ahead, and Jessica thought she was wrong. "Thank you, Mother. Tomorrow, I'll teach them all to write." Clara barely hid her smile.
"Oh, what a strict one you are."
Jessica laughed happily. "Oh, Mom, there are girls walking over there. Can I walk a little bit from the yard so that you can see me from the window? It's not a baby, it's gold. But don't be too long, or it'll be dark soon. In their 2 floors, everyone knew each other. In the evenings, despite the rain and the snow, the old ladies always sat in the yard. If any of the children took a single step off the playground, they would be caught immediately. He would be lectured, and so would his parents. Everybody knew that. Everyone relied on each other. If there was a child on the playground, the old ladies would go away, and the last one would always shout, "Take the children away." That's how we lived. Some of the old ladies stayed in the yard, some were gone, but new ones appeared. Nothing had changed, almost nothing, except that back then Clara was a happy child with loving parents. And now there is a mother who drags everything on herself, and not one relative strangling by her side. There is an aunt, her father's sister, so she lives 1,000 kilometers away. Calls on holidays, sighs, pities her and Jessica's birthday, sends a small remittance, not so much, but they are always happy. Thank you. It is customary in their family, no matter how hard things are at the time. The money is only spent on the gift. Then they call their aunt and tell her what they bought. "My sweet children, I'll never see you again. I guess it's just fate that has scattered us." Clara had seen her Aunt Clara once in her life. She did not know the details, but she knew that her father and her aunt had quarreled so badly that they left for different cities. As soon as they could, they had never spoken to each other because of their age. My aunt came only for the funeral. She cried at the coffin for a long time. What kind of fools are we? We had such a big fight over nothing, and not a single one of us tried to make up. And now it's too late. Forgive me, brother. Will we ever meet again? My aunt was away for 3 days in the winter. Is it a joke to lose the whole family at once? Before she left, the Aurora said, "I understand, Clara. You're an adult, but it's probably better to have someone close by. So if you think about it, come and live with us. We'll help in any way we can." Clara shook her head. "Thank you, Auntie. What's there?" "What's there?" "I'd better start here. where I know everything. Everything is familiar to me. The woman nodded. I knew you would say that. You're very much like your father in character. I look at you. I listen to you. But I see him. Well then, shall we say goodbye? Come and visit. I can't do it myself. This trip is hard for me. Clara understood. Aunt Aurora had bad legs. It was as if they were swollen. She could hardly move, leaning on a cane. Clara accompanied her to the train station. They cried some more. And for more than 10 years now, they'd only talked on the phone. Jessica skipped running to her girlfriends, and Clara walked up to the driveway. Hello. The old ladies had come to life. Hello, Clara. How are you? All is well. I'm fine. Thank you. Are you from work? Yes. Well, go ahead and rest. Keep an eye on your dragonfly. Oh, thank you very much. She smiled again and went into the entryway. It's nice to have that kind of advice in the yard. Nothing ever goes unnoticed. And when he's also so caring, it's so much easier for mothers with children to live. How many times has Clara seen young mothers leave their baby carriages with their grandmothers to run to the store or the pharmacy? Clara went into the kitchen, put out the groceries, and started to cook dinner. Once in a while, she looked out of the window. Jessica and her friends were building a snowman. Spring will come soon. And again her birthday, which deprived her parents. Jessica froze with a potato in her hands. So many years have passed, and she still remembers how yesterday she turned 18. She didn't know that her parents had spent a year saving up to throw her a huge party. That day she woke up in the morning and found a small box on the table by her bed. Clara sat up sharply, took the box. She was so afraid to open it. What if it wasn't what she had dreamed of? Cautiously she opened it, peeked in, and ran in. There were beautiful gold earrings. She had looked at them for so long, but realized that they cost so much that their family just can't afford them. She had small, almost childish, but so paltry that they were not visible. These she spotted a long time ago. Fortunately, the way from the technical school passed by a jewelry store. Every morning salesgirls stood in front of the window. There was no light beauty there, but these earrings were something special, straight as narrow plates and studded with stones at the bottom. Clara later found out that these stones were not precious. And if they were real, those earrings would have cost 100 times more. Mom and Dad came into the room. Daughter, congratulations on your coming of age. She flew out of bed in a whirlwind. Mommy, Daddy, thank you. You have no idea how happy I am. Daddy grinned into his mustache. That's not all. The main surprise lay ahead. At 4:00 p.m., her mother and father took her to a restaurant, and all her friends, classmates and classmates and classmates were there. And no one said a word to her that they were invited to a birthday party. Clara was so shocked that she even forgot to smile. The presents, the toasts. It was the best, coolest day of her life. In the middle of the evening, her mother came up to her. Sweetie, you're going out, and we're going home. After all, we're not that young. Mom, why don't you stay? Clara, have fun. You're an adult now, and no one's going to give you a party for nothing, so have fun. And frankly, we want to lie down. Mom laughed, threw her daughter in the nose, and they left. It was only 15 minutes away from home, since Clara's father did not drink. The parents were on their own outing. It must have been an hour. You, Clara. There was silence at the table. Your parents were in an accident. Both of them died. We need you to go to a lineup. That's the last thing Clara heard. She was immediately engulfed in darkness. A snowball slammed loudly through the window. Clara twitched. She was thinking about something, and dinner wouldn't cook itself. The woman only had time to turn off the gas. The door slammed. Mom, come help me take off my jacket. Clara sighed. That's the only time Jessica talked like that was when she came in wearing snowflakes. She went out into the hallway. God, there was a snowdrift standing and smiling instead of her. Apparently, it began to come to life by nightfall, and all the flying snow was permanently glued to the girl's clothes. "No, Mom, I'm just a little snowy." Clara couldn't help smiling. Sometimes her daughter, not realizing it herself, would crack such witty jokes that she could bring her to tears with laughter, and there was no point in swearing. Everyone was like that. Clara remembered. She was 8 years old, and of course they were secretly riding down the mountain on the hood of a car. Clara was soaking wet and covered with snow, and she was offended. She leaned against the iron fence and stood there pouting. No one was in any hurry to make peace with her, and we had to stand there for a long time. When everyone began to leave, which was close to nightfall, Clara decided to go home too, but it wasn't to be. Her coat was stuck to the fence and no one was going to let her go. There was no one left on the playground. If only she'd been in the yard. It was behind the house, where the old lady's eyes couldn't reach it. Clara had no choice but to slip out of her coat and go home. Her mother almost had a heart attack when she saw her daughter like that. The woman clutched her chest and barely audibly asked, "What happened?" "Daughter," Clara said grimly. "The coat stuck." How was everyone laughing afterwards? And Clara herself still smiles when she remembers that day. "Let me help you, grief. You are mine." We had to hurry because mine was starting to drip. Clara threw all her outer clothes, her daughter's, into the tub, let them stand, and then she would see what to do with them. Just dry it or wash it. And Jessica said, "If you walk like that, the jacket will turn into rags by the end of winter and you'll have to wear it to kindergarten." Jessica snickered angrily, but then she said, "I'm going to change, aren't I? And I won't be like that." The girl couldn't find the right word. Finally, it hit her. "Oh, I can't with you. Every word is a masterpiece. Sit down for supper." At home, my Jessica was a keen person, and she really had the right word for it. If Jessica was interested in something, Clara always held her hand firmly in the street, because the girl could just stop at something that interested her and get lost. It had happened before. Of course, Jessica was not lost, but such stops were not uncommon. Good thing that Clara knew about it and always kept a close eye on her. Jessica ate with appetite and emotion. However, dinner was a little long because Jessica was also telling me about the competition she had with the girls from the neighboring yard. "Can you imagine, Mom? They came to our yard and said they would make a better snowman in our yard out of our snow." Clara was washing the dishes and smiling. "But it's not enough to share the snow, we don't share either." "Why do they say that? Who had the better one in the end?" "The snowman, Mom, of course. Is that ours? Although they say they are. We almost had a fight at first, but then we made up and decided they were both good." "How did yours win then?" Jessica sighed as the girls from the next yard left. We thought about it some more, and then we gave ours the win. Jessica looked at her mother triumphantly. "But that's not right. The decision was made by everyone, and then you changed it." "I know, Mom. That's why we agreed not to tell anyone." Jessica stopped chewing. She looked at her mother with horror on. "You won't tell anyone, will you?" "I swear to no one." The girl sighed in relief. "Can I go to bed now? Are you tired?" "Very much so, of course. Go brush your teeth." An hour later, Clara lay down too. She went to bed, but she couldn't sleep. After the funeral, the investigator called her in. He hid his eyes and kept apologizing. Then, apparently overcome by himself, he said, "A man wants to talk to you." "What kind of person?" "The one who caused the accident." Clara tensed up. She knew that a large foreign car had crashed into her parents' Zigul, and the driver of the foreign car turned out to be drunk. "Why?" "I don't want to talk to him. I would still ask you to do it. It wouldn't cost you anything." 5 minutes just to listen to him. Jessica didn't want to do it, but that's what the investigator asked. I guess a person needs to speak out and ask for forgiveness to make himself feel better. But what Clara heard shocked her. A man of about 50 years of age said in a rather rude manner, "I offer you money and you forget all that ever happened." She was confused at first, then she asked me again, "Excuse me." The man wrinkled his nose as if the Clara was bothering him to live. "How much money do you need so you won't remember this accident anywhere?" "Ever." Clara put her head down, as much as is enough to get her parents back. The man didn't care. Was he drumming his fingers on the table on principle? "You can't get them back, and you can make me look bad." "Do you have a reputation?" "I never would have thought so." The man looked at her angrily. Clara was so angry that she went to the chief of police and told him everything. He was silent for a while, then he said, "I understand your indignation, but I want you to listen to me. I've been working in the agencies for a long time, and I know very well that money can do a lot of things here, too. It never used to be like this. It used to be that the honor of the uniform was the honor. Ask me why I don't fight. First of all, I have 2 years left, and secondly, the fish rots from the head. This man who is responsible for the death of your parents has someone higher than all of us put together. Even if you say no, write hundreds of statements. They'll let him go anyway. But you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. I know Jack well. There's nothing sacred about that man, believe me. I'd only advise you from experience not to ruin your life. He's very vindictive. You have no idea how much Clara has already cried. How come he ruined my parents? And I'm supposed to walk around looking over my shoulder." The warden threw up his hands. "That's the way life is now, kiddo." Clara decided that she would not forgive and would not go to the world. But it couldn't be that bad. As it turned out, it couldn't be that bad. At the trial, her dead father turned out to have been drinking. And he, too, had broken the rules. Jack looked at her with contempt. Clara jumped out into the street. Tears were flowing in a hail of tears. All she could think about was getting home as soon as possible so she wouldn't have to see those hateful faces. She did not go outside for almost a week. Then, after all, she had to. The refrigerator was empty. Did she have to do something about her studies or her job? She didn't know yet. But one thing she did know. One day her life would change so much that she would be able to punish this Archie. The Claras were allowed to skip classes as honor students. "Look, I have a Clara. If anyone finds out, they'll take my head off, and if you screw up your exams and credits, too." She sat in front of the principal and smiled. "He only looks very formidable, but in fact he is a very kind and good man." "Did you find a job?" "Not yet, but I'm going to start today." "She'll start. I envy your naivety, Clara. Who needs you at under 19 and no education? Sit in the hallway. I'll call some people I know." "Thank you." Clara jumped out into the hallway. What a kind principal they have after all. He called her 10 minutes later. "Here's the address. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock. You can't be late. Someone I know needs a secretary." "Thank you very much." Clara couldn't resist hugging him. He was embarrassed. "Go already." Lisa Clara worked for that acquaintance for 3 whole years, until she went on maternity leave. And then, when Jessica was old enough for her to come back, he offered her a completely different position, more solid or something. She now worked in the land department of a construction firm. The work was interesting. She especially liked going out and evaluating lots. She never once made a mistake. In addition, she gave great recommendations to advertise those plots that had been on the market for a long time, and they flew apart like hotcakes. The boss, of course, noticed and praised Clara. Not only did she enjoy her work, but also her schedule. She always made it to the daycare center in time. No overnights. True, sometimes she had to work on her day off when clients couldn't or wouldn't free up a weekday. She didn't notice how she fell asleep. It seems that just closed her eyes, and already the alarm clock. Clara quickly turned it off and looked at her daughter, who was asleep on her bed. No, she hadn't even moved. But there was nothing surprising about that. When Jessica fell asleep, you could have rung the bells. She wouldn't have woken up anyway. Clara quietly went out, washed her face, drank her coffee, put food on the table for her daughter's microwave, and her daughter knew how to use it. And she was forbidden to touch the gas. Clara looked once more into the room, asleep, and went to work with peace of mind. A neighbor had the keys to the apartment. If Clara stayed longer than she planned, she called her, and she went to check on the girl. Today, everything went even faster than Clara had planned. Both the buyer and the seller were happy with the work of Clara. So immediately on the spot, they gave her a bonus for her efficiency, for counting correctly, and for the day off. Clara was happy. In fact, she wasn't earning too badly, better than many people in this town. But Clara always tried to dress well to clothe her daughter. Yes, and the apartment food was often more than her salary. In addition, there were unforeseen expenses. For example, a dripping faucet in the bathroom. How long it will last, it is still unclear. Clara ran to the store, bought a cake, and headed home. She opened the door, walked in. Strange. No one meets her. "I'm home, kitten." Jessica came out of the room. Cheeks, red lips, pale Clara almost dropped the cake. "Are you sick?" She rushed to the girl. "I am. She's burning up like a fire. Get to bed quick." But Jessica didn't go to bed. She took the couch in front of the TV. I guess that's where she was waiting for her mother. Judging by the trail she left in, Clara ran into the kitchen, grabbed a thermometer, and returned to her daughter. 3 minutes later, she looked, Jesus, 36. I ran back to the kitchen, the first aid kit, and back to my daughter. She left the poor child alone. What kind of mother is she after that? Jessica was rarely sick, but she liked being sick terribly. Mama runs around, fussing over everything Jessica wants, buying her everything. There was just one thing that made Jessica sad. When you're sick, you don't want anything. You don't want all the ice cream you can get, or some unexplored fruit. When the girl was getting better, with regret sighed, "Be sure to write a list of things to ask for next time." Of course she forgot when the medicine began to work. Jessica began to fall asleep. Clara gently laid her down, pushing up the plaid. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be easier." Jessica closed her eyes, and Clara sighed. "Tomorrow will be easier. Tonight is going to be a fun night." Jessica hadn't been sick for more than 3 days. The first day she used to have such a fever that you had to call an ambulance. But that was before. Clara's doing fine on her own now. Then there were 2 more days of a weak cold. On the 4th day, the child wakes up with a great appetite. It's a peculiarity of her father. "Oh, you remembered." Clara was even angry with herself because she categorically did not want to remember her father. But sometimes she even dreamt about him. She would wake up in tears, and then she couldn't sleep for a long time. No one knew what had made them part. No one knew what her father was now. Clara took another look at her daughter. How much she resembled him. Smart, slender, a face as if Tony had been painted as a girl. Never had Clara seen such a strong resemblance to her father's. She looked like her father, too, but one only noticed it when Daddy and her were around. But here, if anyone knew Tony, when they saw Jessica, they would say they were related. Then she thought about it and decided to bake a charlotte. Jessica loved this simple pie. It seemed that maybe at least a slice of charlotte would do. The cake went safely into the refrigerator. Then they would get to it. And Clara began to make the dough. The doorbell rang. Clara went to open it, or rather, ran. Who was it, I wondered? Standing on the doorstep was Alaska, her best friend and part-time godmother, Jessica. and I didn't understand why my friend wasn't meeting me. Alaska got married 3 years ago, and she and her husband decided to move to the country. At the time, many people laughed at their decision. Honestly, neither could Clara imagine Alaska, who always had nails and eyelashes and all, in a country setting. But Alaska was adamant. "We'll prove to you how you can live in the countryside." She sold the apartment she inherited from her grandmother, and to the lamentation of her parents, she left for some remote place. For the first year, there was practically no news from them. The second year, Alaska showed up. Clara looked at her with her mouth hanging open. Nothing in principle has changed. Long nails, eyelashes. "How are you?" Laughed. "Oh, I can't go with you. You sit in your city. You do not see anything. And in the countryside, by the way, in our non-environmental times, you can build a good business." And Alaska and her husband built it. And what a great one. An entire empire in a very short time. With the money she got for the apartment, they bought a house, a large plot of land, hired workers, bought some cattle, and began to do business. Now there were such exotics, such fur coats, such a car that all her city girlfriends were only biting their elbows. "Alaska, how good to see you. Come on in." Alaska had complexes about her body and was constantly on a diet. Her husband was able to convince Alaska that she was beautiful just the way she was. Alaska began laying out the presents: meat, sour cream, cheese, milk. When the table was already piled high, she pulled out a jar. "As I knew it, these are the products of our new production." "What's that? What is what?" "The village is honey. You didn't have any bees. Why wasn't it? But you never said anything about them. What's there to talk about? Bees are like bees. They fly. They buzz. They bring in money." "Oh, Alaska." "What's the big deal, Alaska? Is it bad to have a lot of money?" "That's very good. If it weren't for Alaska, there wouldn't be as many as 15 jobs in our remote village." "Do you already have 15 people working for you?" Clara's eyes widened. "Yeah, but these are the permanent ones. And then there are the seasonal ones." "Well, you're a feudal lord." Clara wanted to add something, but something was heard from the room. She went to her daughter, and Alaska followed her. "Oh, Aunt Alaska, what kind of aunt am I to you? How many times do I have to tell you?" Alaska sat down and hugged Jessica. "What's the matter with you? Are you ill?" "That's how it happened." "That's a load of crap you got there. Listen, Jessica, I wanted to ask you something. There are some tablets out there now." "Yeah, I know. It's pretty cool. There's only one guy in our yard who has one." "And would you like to?" "I wish I could. But it's expensive, and I draw anyway." Alaska gestured with a wizard's gesture to the clipboard. Jessica's eyes were so wide that her friends laughed. Jessica seemed to be feeling fine. Or maybe it was the clipboard that had that effect on her. In any case, Clara took her temperature and called Alaska into the kitchen. The girl didn't seem to notice that they had left. She was so absorbed in studying the new toy. Clara put the kettle on, took out the cake. Why did she come unannounced? Alaska looked at her mysteriously. "I have to go to the hospital to take some tests." Clara was looking at her friend carefully. She wanted to think about good things, but it was embarrassing to ask. She knew how worried Alaska was because she had not been able to get pregnant for 3 years. She asked anyway. "Alaska, you have that look, that's what I think." And Alaska jumped up, spun around the kitchen. "Yes." Clara exhaled. "Finally, congratulations. Does Bucky know?" "No, I won't say anything until the doctor tells me that I'm not wrong, that everything is fine." "Alaska, I'm so happy for you. He's sure to have a heart attack from such news." My friend laughed happily. "He'll get over it. He's a strong one." Clara hid a chuckle. Bucky, Alaska's husband, was a very smart man. "Well, the thing is, When Clara first saw him, she was a little shocked. Bucky was about half a head shorter than Alaska, and the size of him. They call him wiry, not a pound of fat, skinny lean. Next to the Alaskan, he looked like a kid, a teenager. But that was only his first impression. After talking to him, Clara realized the first. Bucky's got a steel character and you can feel it right away. The second is that his whole personality disappears. When he's around Alaska, he just loses his mind. He looks at Alaska like he's a hypnotist. He never loves her, and he'd kill himself to make sure his beloved wife had a good life. The friends sat in the kitchen and talked for almost a long time. Every now and then they stopped by to see Jessica, but the girl wasn't busy with them, having borrowed her mother's phone. Jessica called her girlfriends and shared the news. Not just shared, but described all the benefits of a cool tablet. Alaska came back from her room and sat down at the table. "I'm sorry, Clara, but Jessica, the older she gets, the more like Archie." "Yes, I know. Don't you think I can't see it? There's still nothing from him." Clara shook her head. "No. And I don't need to see him. I don't want to see him at all." Alaska looked at her friend carefully and sighed. "You're a fool, Clara. It's not his fault he was born into the wrong family. So be it. Let it be. He loved you like that. Alaska, let's close the subject. I don't want to see where he is or what's wrong with him. I'm not interested at all." She wasn't just curious. She'd had even tried several times to look for Archie through social networks, through his friends, on abandoned pages years ago, but had accumulated nothing. Concluded that he'd gotten married or moved away or something. Tried to forget, and though she convinced herself that she hated the man, I realized that it wasn't really true. "Well, if you don't want to, let's not dwell on the past. I have a feeling that in another 5 minutes there will be no more Charlotte left." Clara jumped up, groaned, and rushed to the stove. What a thing to say. "It's you, Alaska. It's always like that when you sit down, the lights go out." Alaska laughed merrily. Jessica came to them. Jessica very much wanted to know what fun was going on in the kitchen. Jessica took her lap there and soon fell asleep. Alaska carefully moved her to the couch by the wing and dipped her cheek into Clara, who was watching all this, whispered, "You're going to be a great mother." And my friend suddenly asked seriously, "Do you really think so?" "Really, I'll go and make the bed for you and me." They talked softly for another 2 hours, reminiscing about their school years. Clara told me who she had seen from her classmates, who got married, who got divorced, who was born. Then Alaska said everything. "Claire will talk tomorrow. I'm very sleepy." "Come on, Alaska. Good night." Alaska fell asleep quickly and Clara could not sleep. That's why they remembered the Archies. Now she tosses and turns again until morning, remembering they met at work. Clara was busy bringing some reports to the computer. Archie came to see her boss. He looked cool, of course. It was obvious that the young man was no mere mortal, but Clara was not surprised. She had seen more than that in her time at the firm. The boss wasn't here and wouldn't be today. He stood right in front of her. "What are we going to do about it?" Clara looked up at him in surprise. "I don't know what you're going to do about it." "Young lady, what's your name?" Clara frowned. "What does it matter?" The young man squinted and suddenly laughed. "Clara, no way. Are you serious? There are such names now." Clara blushed all over. At school she had to endure mockery. Then it got easier, and now something's wrong again. "You have a strange reaction to a common name." The man suppressed a laugh. "I'm sorry. It's out of surprise, honestly. I didn't mean to offend you personally." Clara stopped paying attention to him. He didn't say anything more either. He just said goodbye and left. The working day was over in 30 minutes. You could relax a little because now nobody else would come. Clara leaned back in her chair. Isn't that nice? Tomorrow is the day off. She could get a good night's sleep. The young man's laughter left a slightly unpleasant residue, but she decided he didn't deserve her upset. Half an hour later, she turned off the computer, threw on her raincoat, and jumped out of the office. Just as she came to a stop, a jeep pulled up to her. The window rolled down, and Clara saw the same young man. "Clara, excuse me. Let me give you a ride." Clara saw her bus coming to the bus stop. She shook her head and stepped towards the bus. I couldn't believe my eyes. The other one would have thrown herself on the hood just to get in the car with him. This was the bus she'd picked. But no, he wouldn't let that happen. The bus drove right past him. He could clearly see that the girl Clara was looking at him and smiling. Archie felt a kind of excitement in his chest. All right, so be it. He followed the bus. At every stop, he stopped with the bus to see if the Clara came out. How carefully he looked, how hard he tried. But he got as far as the park, and the girl never came out. Or rather, she must have come out. But he missed her. Archie slammed the door in annoyance, and then laughed. She'd seen him coming, so she'd led him around on purpose. But Clara got off the bus. "Thank you, Uncle. You're welcome. Run along now." Clara lived just outside the park. All the drivers already knew her and never tried to drop her off. If she didn't go through the park, she was right in front of her own yard. She walked and smiled mentally. She could see perfectly well that this young man was following her. For some reason, it did not seem to me that he was to be feared. Though he did not behave himself very well, he did not arouse any negative emotion. She didn't regret running away from him. Why would she need these fleeting acquaintances, especially with such people? Clara always walked to work in the mornings. Such a walk was invigorating. It helped her wake up. The weather wasn't great today, but Clara decided to stick to her rules. As soon as she turned to the office, she saw a familiar car. The girl slowed down, frowning. Now that kind of interest was getting weird. Then she relaxed. She thought something of herself. He'd just come to see her boss. Clara strode resolutely toward the entrance, but didn't make it very far. The car door opened. "Clara." She stopped, sighed, and turned around. "The boss has to be on time today." "Clara, he's not that important to me today. Right now, I am much more interested in you. I'd like to invite you over tonight. We'll listen to music. We'll drink some real Italian wine." Archie wanted to continue, especially since the standard set of phrases worked without fail. But Clara interrupted him. "You don't have to try. You don't have to go on. I don't have to go on. I don't have to go on. I don't accept the invitation." She turned around and went into the office, and Archie remained standing there with his mouth open. Something he didn't understand now. What was that about? Maybe it was just Clara not knowing who he was. He got into the car and forcefully slammed the door. An interesting thought crossed his mind. What if it's luck and really doesn't care that he comes from such a family? That his daddy's got a lot of money? No, there's no such thing in today's world. Or is there? He never quite figured it out. Only completely confused. She cautiously looked out through the glass door, and then she was shocked. So it is. Standing, waiting for her, but no. And she does not intend to communicate with him again. The girl resolutely turned around and went out the back door, went around the building, looked out. The car was sideways to her, and she could clearly see the man looking at the entrance. There was the bus. She walked briskly toward the bus. Archie never saw her when the guards closed the door. Well, the second time it's like a baby around the finger. Why? It's very interesting. It's interesting to get someone who doesn't need you at all. Clara decided that the likes of Archie wouldn't play for long, so she could rest easy. But she was wrong. In the morning, as soon as she got to work, she immediately saw Archie. He was coming out of her boss's house. He was coming out of her boss's house. He left a card on her desk, invitations to the concert. Clara opened it and froze. It was her favorite band. No, she wasn't going. But how could she not go if the only people she had been listening to lately would be singing there? For the rest of the day, she thought about it, agonized over whether or not to go. She called and yelled in a crazy voice, "Clara, they only have concerts in our town for 3 days. I know you're mad at me. You hate me, but they gave me a ticket at work, and I'm going. Even if after that you will never talk to me." Clara listened to her friend with a smile, Alaska in her repertoire, smoke, sparks, hoof, stomping. "Alaska, speak. I'm ready to hear everything from you." "Alaska, I'm going to a concert too. I was invited by a young man." "Who invited you but a young man? You didn't say you had a young man." "So I don't have one. He just invited me. I didn't understand anything. But since you're going away, we'll stay friends." Clara couldn't hold back any longer. She laughed. "You seriously thought I wouldn't talk to you if you went to the concert? I wouldn't forgive you." "Oh, Alaska, you're being silly." "Well, of course you would." At the bottom of the card was a number, or rather handwritten. Yes, there was no doubt. That voice belonged to the very young man. "I could not refuse your invitation. I couldn't, even if I really wanted to. I'm very glad you agreed. I really love this band myself. But I'm telling you right now, after the concert, I'm going home." The voice on the phone was so naturally surprised that Clara believed him. "Did you have any other plans?" "It's just that I have an early flight tomorrow. I was going home after the concert too." Clara blushed thickly and then smiled. Revenge. Archie hung up the phone. Oddly enough, the evening went well. Archie was getting ready for some kind of village epic. But Clara looked pretty good. The clothes might not be very expensive, but they were so well chosen that she looked a plus. Besides, when she was not showing off, she was a worldly girl for whom any kind of a ruckus is a joy. Sometime in the middle of the evening, they ran into Clara's girlfriend in the crowd. At first, Archie was upset, but then he remembered that he wasn't going to generalize to Clara for the evening anyway. So he watched them. Her friend was generally the one they climbed up somewhere high and sang along from there. But he couldn't stay away like an almost gentleman. He reached out to them. It was the mass that started to grow and broke. Clara broke her knee and arm, and Archie took on the two girls, one of whom was pretty good, having fun. Alaska rushed one way, and Archie grabbing Clara's hand in the other. He saw the guards running toward them. And he also finally saw that there was a camera on top of the mast from which the concert was apparently being filmed. They stopped just inside the park, collapsed on a bench, laughing and trying to catch their breath. Clara was already looking at the man with interest. "Are you a good runner?" he laughed. "And you on the masts, bent in half. We didn't listen to the last song. Don't feel bad. Do you want me to get you tickets for tomorrow too?" "No, you don't have to. That would be unnecessary. Why don't we go out for ice cream and juice?" To be honest, my throat was all dry. We didn't have long walks afterwards. Archie was not at all what she had first imagined him to be. He knew a lot and made clever jokes. And Clara realized she was very interested in him. Then he walked her home. "Clara, I was very wrong at first. You'll have to forgive me." But at that moment, she didn't even think about it. She just nodded her head and said, "You know how to find me." And she ran off into the entryway. And Archie smiled. How could he not immediately have considered that Clara was so extraordinary? Their romance was so beautiful, so tender and romantic, that Clara believed that books about love do not lie. There is real love, and halves exist too. It couldn't be any other way. And then Archie asked her to marry him, and she said yes. "My father is expecting us tonight. I'll tell you right off the bat. My relationship with him isn't great, but we try to keep it right. My mother divorced him 10 years ago, and then she died. Now we're learning to be a family again. Clara was terribly worried. She carefully prepared herself, put on her best dress, and spent an hour in front of the mirror. They drove up to a large mansion. Clara's heart was pounding terribly, but she calmed herself down. This mansion could have been sold 100 times already. What was she so worried about? They walked in, and Clara saw the man she hated so much that she dreamt about him. It was Jack. It's you. He was looking at her too. Archie looked back and forth between Clara and his father in surprise. Do you two know each other? Do we know each other? More than that, your father ruined my parents right on my birthday. But thanks to his money, he pulled it off. So they were the ones to blame for his death, not yours. He also told me to walk around and look around. How's that for familiarity, Clara? But I didn't know. And I don't care. I hope you understand that I can never have anything in common with your family. She turned and sprinted out into the street. Clara didn't know if Archie was running after her or not, so only the wind was whistling in her ears. Archie tried to talk to her. He would meet her after work and follow her, telling her that he had left his father, that he didn't want anything from him, but only her. But Clara wouldn't listen to him. Then one day she saw a television program on TV. Clara watched it often, and that day she sat down on the sofa too. It always showed very complicated crimes. That day, when she saw the splash screen, Clara became numb. She turned up the volume. It was about her parents, about what had really happened. She never understood what really happened. But Jack was gone from their town. Archie was gone too. He never came back, never said anything, never persuaded her. Clara breathed a sigh of relief, but not for long. It wasn't long before she realized she was pregnant. What then was going on in her soul? And already, that she was carrying a grandchild or granddaughter of the man who had ruined her parents, and the joy that she would no longer be alone. There was no question of terminating the pregnancy. She never even thought of doing so. And then Alaska, when she found out that Clara was pregnant with Archie, said, "No matter what you tell me, but I liked Archie. He didn't choose who he was born to. And the kid had good genes. He wasn't a drunk. He wasn't stupid. And he was cute too." Clara smiled sadly. "That's right. You forgot to add that he's very charming. We'll grow up." And so it came out. And they raised her, and they made a hell of a girl. In the morning, Jessica woke up before everyone else. Clara quietly left the room to make breakfast, and then there was a glow under the covers. A heavy sigh was heard from under the blanket, and Jessica slowly looked out. "What have you got there?" Jessica took out her clipboard. Clara sighed. "So there is a time to sleep, to sleep. Sleep restores the body's strength, especially in girls who are sick. Mom, I get it. I really hope so, because otherwise I'll have to give you the tablet by the hour." Jessica sighed heavily again, and then looked slyly at her mother. "And now, since I've already got one, can I keep drawing?" Clara jumped out of the bedroom to keep from laughing. But how to talk to her? Alaska returned in the afternoon. She looked a little confused. Clara even thought that the pregnancy was not confirmed. "Alaska, what did they tell you?" Alaska looked at her with a detached look, and then smiled. "Clara, you won't believe it. Bucky is going crazy because I already have." "Alaska, are you scaring me?" "Clara, we're having twins." Clara was silent for a while, digesting the information, and then she hugged her friend. "Everything's a mess for you, but it's always the best." "Clara, I don't know how to tell him about it just like that. Just like that. But you make him so happy." Alaska grabbed the phone and ran into the kitchen. She was back in about 15 minutes. She looked even more confused now than when she'd come in. But now what? Clara thought Alaska's husband wasn't happy about the addition. Bucky's not happy. I'm glad, I'm very glad. Then what happened? He cried. When Alaska said this, Clara herself did not cry. It was so. There was no way she could find the words. It was so great. It was still so nice. 3 hours later, the doorbell rang. Clara went to answer it. It was strange. She wasn't expecting anyone. She looked through the peephole, smiled, and opened the door. There was a bouquet on the threshold. That's what you could call Bucky, because the bouquet took up all the space of almost 1.5 meters of roses. How many? Clara couldn't even say roughly because she had never seen so many. Clara smiled and pointed her finger at the door of the room. Bucky smiled back and moved over there. Or rather, the flowers moved because Bucky was hard to see from behind them. Anyway, Bucky took his Alaska away noisily, hugging. Jessica put her tablet aside. Mom, is Aunt Alaska going to have babies? Yeah, 2 at once. It's good. If I had a brother or sister, I'd have fun too. But that rarely happens. Clara saw that Jessica wanted to ask another question. Daughter, is there anything else you wanted to ask? Yes, Mom. I have Alaska from next door at Mickey's kindergarten who has no daddy. Why? Clara was confused. It was a question she had not expected, or rather, not much that her daughter would ever ask it, but at the age of 6.5. But it happens that people love each other, and then something happens and they break up. And you, did you break up with my dad too? I'm sorry, there was nothing to do but nod, and he's not at all interested in what I am, Jessica. He doesn't know about you. He left early. Even I didn't know then that I was going to have you. And where he is, I don't know. I probably would have told him about you now and lied. She would never let that family communicate with Jessica. The girl thought a little more, then picked up her clipboard. Clara sighed in relief, hoping the question was over. But it wasn't. Mom, do you think if Dad knew about me, would he love me? But, of course, how could anyone not love you? Now Jessica smiled and sighed contentedly. Clara hurried into the kitchen. What a conversation. Jessica was drawing Papa. She had no idea what her daddy looked like, but she knew that he was just like other daddies. Only her daddy was 100 times better. He's kind, he's smart, he likes to walk in the park and feed the ducks. He also likes to make up new hairstyles for dolls. Someday he's bound to be found. And Jessica will tell him how long I've been waiting for you. The girl was dreaming so much that she didn't notice how she fell asleep. Clara looked in on her, asleep. Time is still short, of course, but she was awake at lunchtime. The woman didn't bother her. There isn't much time yet. She could lie down, flip through the tape on her phone. In general, she was not a big fan of social networks, but sometimes she could look through the news, immediately become aware of all the cases who got married, who is looking for someone again, who is looking for someone again, who had someone born, or who bought what car. She was just flying in when she got a social media message. Hi, what are you doing? Clara sighed heavily. It was Sandro. He'd been working at their firm for about 6 months. By the way, the boss said he was very capable and would go far. And for 6 months he had been trying to woo Clara. Sandro was a handsome man, too handsome. Clara would even say Slavic women never liked such men. So Andrei only had to sigh. True, he himself did not approach her openly. Or like secretly, then put a chocolate bar on her table, then put a flower, then sits in front of her eyes. A couple of times he invited her out, but Clara refused. There was nothing to do. There was no interesting news. So Clara replied, Hi, not doing anything. Sandro immediately started writing a message, and Clara got comfortable. At least this way the time would pass soon. Clara, I've liked you for a long time, and you know it yourself. I'd like to come and visit you, meet your daughter, and get to know you better. I can see that you have your heart set against me. I really don't know why. It's not like I've done anything wrong to you. I'm sorry. It was embarrassing. It's not nice, of course. Though on the other hand, he didn't say anything openly to her. It was the first time he had said it, or rather written it. Clara thought about it. She has been alone for so long. And not even because she was afraid. Rarely do strange men treat their faces well. That was exactly what she wasn't afraid of, because the first wrong look thrown in her Jessica's direction would have ended the whole relationship right away. She just didn't seem to care that much. And time is running out. She wanted to be someone's wife too, to be loved. Meet them after work, bring them after work, bring them coffee in bed, and why not Sandro? He earns good money. Calm, handsome. She didn't notice him getting into hard liquor or anything else. All in all, a positive man. What if it works out for her? Yeah, she doesn't like him very much. Well, that's okay. Maybe he's a good man and things will gradually fall into place. No, Sandro. It's just that I didn't think you really liked me. Let's meet, for example, tomorrow. No, I can't tomorrow. My daughter got sick. There was a pause. Clara already thought that Sandro had just decided, since no means no. But soon a message arrived for her. So ask someone to sit with her, or let her be alone. Sorry. Good night. She watched as Sandra sent her angry emoticons and hearts for another 15 minutes, and thought about the fact that she didn't like him right. You can't fool the heart in your head. Then a nasty voice said, You will, you will. What about Archie? And then, for the first time since she'd broken up with Archie, Clara thought. It wasn't his fault he was born into this particular family, but that's just one way of looking at it. And on the other hand, on the other. More than 7 years passed, he never showed up, and with that thought, Clara went to sleep. Sunday morning came, and a decision had to be made. Would they go on sick leave, or would it still be enough to ask for a couple of days? I decided that it would be better to ask for sick leave, because there were no urgent deals yet. Here's the sick leave for 5 days. That's a week. The boss had no problem letting her go. And in the end he said, You're growing, Clara, you're growing. I got a call from your customers, and they're happy as hell. Thank you, Chief. It was you who taught me everything. She heard that he was very pleased with her praise and smiled. In general, she was very lucky with her boss. Sometimes he treated her as if he were her father. Clara hung up, went into her daughter's room. You and I rest for 2 more days, but my daughter wasn't in her room. She turned around and saw the front door open and her daughter's jacket missing. Yeah, she's out of her mind, she just had a fever. And ran outside. It wasn't like Jessica at all. She would never leave without telling her mother. Clara looked out the window and aghast and ran across the yard to the garbage cans. A homeless man was sitting there. It was clear from afar how cold he was. Her daughter was dragging her thick, shaggy plaid in her arms. Clara was still in her bedroom slippers and rushed after her. What is she doing? The hell with the plaid. What if this man hurts her daughter? Clara dashed out into the street and missed her daughter's trail. But Jessica was already by that man's side. She gently opened it, and he was begging, singing with blue lips. Thank you very much, girl. You can tell you're not old. Why don't you go to work? Jessica, hurry home. Mama, but he'll freeze, but you'll freeze too. I haven't forgotten that you're sick. And anyway, what is it? She ran away without saying a word. What if he had hurt you? Jessica was beginning to cry. She could see that her mother was very angry. But why? She just wanted to help the man. The girl turned and walked toward the house, and Clara finally turned to the bum, turned around and went silent. She became as pale as chalk. Then in some unnatural voice she said, "You bum." You looked at her guiltily. "If you want me to go, I'll go if I'm in your way." His eyes were kind, friendly, and empty. "Archie, what are you doing here?" "I'm sorry, but my name is Victor. I'm tired." And Clara understood nothing. She took his not quite clean hand, withdrew her index finger, and looked at Tata. There was a little heart there. It was the same as hers. But for some reason Archie didn't recognize her. And anyway, how could he be on the street in the first place? She thought frantically about what to do. It was clear that she could not let Archie or Victor go in such a state. "Would you like to eat?" "Very." The man smiled like a child. "For some reason I don't get served well. Everyone sends me to work. That's how I work. I don't work for myself." Clara realized that Archie had been taken over by beggars. The only thing she did not understand was what he was doing on the street, what his son of a millionaire was doing here in the first place. "Come with me." The homeless man looked at her frightened. "And that's convenient. Let's go." Clara walked briskly toward the entrance. The homeless man followed her. It seemed to the woman that all the neighbors were looking at her from all the windows at the same time. To hell with them. She would say that she had found her father's old things and decided to give them to the bum. It's just that no one saw him leave. Maybe he stayed in the attic. She might not know. So let them all think what they want. Archie stared. He touched his forehead, looked at the pictures on the wall, at Clara herself. It was as if his mind was a mess, and Clara couldn't understand if he really didn't remember anything for some reason, or had forgotten because he had been drinking and hanging out. She immediately shook herself off. Even though the man was a bum, it didn't look like he was drinking. "Would you like to take a bath?" The bum came to life. "May I?" "Sure. Go ahead. You'll find everything there." She quickly went to a cupboard on 2 shelves somewhere. "There's some stuff at the bottom. There was no way she could have thrown them out. These were her mother's, so to speak, the front compartment. Not that there were parade clothes in there. And that's where she used to put the new things. Then they migrated higher up to the things Dad wore." Clara pulled out a tracksuit. She froze for a minute. Daddy kept meaning to exercise, that is, to run in the morning like many people he knew did. But he kept putting it off and was going to start next Monday and never did. Well, here was a suit his mother had to make for him. And he wore the suit he bought safely and then sighed that he had to start running only in a new one. "Here, it should fit you." While Archie was in the bathroom, Clara called Alaska. "Friend, what should I do?" She briefly outlined the situation, and Alaska waved for a long time, then said in a normal voice, "You need to make an appointment with a doctor. Which one to sign up and how to sign up. He obviously has no documents." "Okay, don't panic. I'm going to call my mom now. She's really into treating anything she might have lately. She'll know exactly what to do when the bathroom door opens and Archie shows up on the doorstep. It was like I was born again. Come into the kitchen. I'll feed you." Jessica was watching from the room. It's one thing to help someone, but it's another thing to bring home a stranger, and someone so strange. Then Jessica decided that her mother probably knew what she was doing and went out into the kitchen. Besides, she really liked this bum, to be honest. He had such smart eyes, and he was kind, and he had a nice smile. She wanted to smile back, too. "Jessica, are you going to eat?" "Yes, Mother." The man looked at the girl. "Thank you very much. I'm kind of more used to kids throwing rocks." Jessica loved her eyes like rocks. "It hurts, doesn't it? What's the point? But there are some kids who do something but don't know why." Jessica shook her head. "I'm not like that." "That's right." The man laughed. "I can see that. You're a smart, serious girl." Clara put the plates in front of them and sat down with a mug of coffee. Tell me, Victor, do you remember anything from your past life? He shook his head. No, so why remember her? Clearly she was the same as she is now. I know so many people from the street. They always lived like that, but you shouldn't do that. Many got on the street completely by accident. Really, for some reason it seems that way to me. Not everyone likes to talk about it. He shrugged his shoulders. I remember myself a long time ago. Well, I don't remember being young, but I'm in my 6th winter on the street. And that's a lifetime. So I doubt I'm a former millionaire. She looked at him and thought that Archie was very close to the truth now, as funny as it sounded to him. Don't you want to remember anything? I don't know. I used to want to. I even went to the police a couple of times. The first time they told me no one was looking for me. The second time they sent me away real quick. They even broke a couple of ribs. You know, it's not good to be outside with broken ribs. That's why I didn't go to them anymore. Besides, if they were looking for me, they probably would have found me. And if they weren't looking for me, then no one wants me. Jessica took a step on her nose. It doesn't work that way. Someone always needs someone. It's just that the person who needs you is lost somewhere too. What if he needs your help? Don't you want to remember anything? Archie looked at her at a loss. The thought had never occurred to him. There you go. Her daughter says all the right things. And Archie suddenly said, I don't understand. I look at your daughter and realize that I've seen her before. It's like she reminds me of someone. Clara sighed. If you only knew who. The phone rang in my pocket. Of course it was Alaska. Write down the address, my friend. Wow, you've got news. It's definitely him. You can't be wrong. Mom says it's just money. By the way, it's not all money. I'll get it for you. Alaska was crackling, so Clara could hardly understand her. Alaska? That's it. Write the address. We'll come to you tomorrow. Hang in there. Clara smiled. It felt like Clara had to be rescued. Alaska and Bucky are like Chip and Dale. She wrote down the address, the phone number. Not a minute later, a text message came in about enrollment. Clara shook her head. Oh, that Alaska. The man gingerly pushed the plate away. Thank you very much. I guess I should be going. I've already overstayed my welcome. You're not going anywhere. We'll go to the hospital tomorrow. He looked at her confused. What for? I don't have any documents. Don't you really want to remember anything? You just reminded me of a man. I want to make sure you're not him. A good man at least. Or maybe he's bad. And then you'll dig me up somewhere. Clara smiled. Good. Clara knew that he had to stay the night. But no matter what you say, he's in the dark in his head. But she didn't want to let him go outside. The woman looked out the window. 2 homeless men found something in the dumpster and wiggled. They dragged the something. But something must have gone wrong. They argued, and then they started fighting. Both of them were drunk. Clara grimaced. No way. She shared Archie's couch in the big room, and she and her daughter retired to the small room. Before she went to sleep, she put a chair under her arm. Jessica's eyes rounded. Mommy, what's that for? But we don't know Victor. What if he is? She saw her daughter's eyes widen with fear and hurriedly said, what if he's a lunatic? Do you remember how you came to the kitchen? Do you sleep yourself? Jessica laughed merrily. I remember you were so frightened then, but I don't want you and me to be scared. Jessica snuggled up to her. Mommy, are you so kind to me? Well, I don't know, really. This Victor is good, I see. It's just that he got sick and forgot everything. You will help him, won't you? I'll try. In the morning, the doorbell woke them all up. The time was 7:00. Clara jumped out into the hallway. Who's there at this hour? Bucky was standing on the doorstep. Clara, how are you? It's all right. What's wrong, Bucky? He looked at her worriedly. Where's your Archie? There in the room. Why, Clara, you need to pack up now and come with me. Where to? I'll tell you all about it on the way. Jessica flew out of the room and hung on to Bucky. Hello, mine. It's a good one. I'm right behind you. You're coming to visit me. I'm going. And my mother. Clara didn't understand anything, but she knew that Bucky was a serious and very sensible man, unlike Alaska. So she didn't argue, just asked for a long time, hopefully for a couple of days. And then we'll see. They all got in the car. Archie looked around. Nice interior. Bucky gave him a quick look. Do you like it? Yes, very much. They drove in silence. Clara finally couldn't stand it. Bucky at least explained something. Clara, tell me, when did Archie disappear? Did you look for any information about him? No, I didn't need it then. And for nothing. I was surfing the World Wide Web yesterday and I found a lot of interesting things. Archie was accused of wanting to kill his father, and Archie disappeared. Then there was a lot of writing about him running away. Most of that information came from his father. You see, when it started, it turned out that Archie was not Jack's own son. Even Jack himself was shocked, and he left right away. The search slowly began to fade, but in those days there were those who didn't believe Archie was capable of such a thing, and they blamed his father. They said he had set the whole thing up to deprive his son of money, and they found out later that he wasn't his son. Anyway, Archie's still missing, and his daddy's living quietly in the next town over. Do you think he'd be happy if he knew Archie was alive? It seems to me that the arrival of a son, though not by blood, but by blood, officially it doesn't do him any good. Besides, Archie can obviously shed light on what happened when the assassination attempt took place. Innocent people were hurt, and if Archie is found, or rather, if he is found, there are two options. Either he goes straight to jail or his father is proved guilty. Now figure out what to do. All this, of course, only if he remembered anything at all. Their heads were spinning. What a detective. And she thought Archie had just accepted and bailed. She looked at Archie. He was sitting there frowning. He'd heard the whole conversation, of course, understood what was being said about him. He just didn't understand anything else. He didn't want to go to jail, and for that he had to remember everything. His head ached terribly. It always did when he got nervous, especially if he tried to remember everything. They drove up to the big house. Clara said in surprise, "I thought you had another one." Bucky grinned. "You should visit more often." Archie looked at the house with admiration too. Alaska jumped out of the gate. "Well, finally. How long have I been waiting for this?" They hugged and walked in. Clara turned to Bucky. "Bucky, I don't understand. What do we do now?" "Now we'll think." They sat down at the table. In a second, Alaska set everything up as if it were a holiday. Bucky spoke up. "Victor, though may I call you Archeo?" The man nodded. He didn't care what they called him anymore. "Anyway, I think you should stay here. Clara and her daughter can stay here and go away, so no one will suspect anything. And we'll try to see a doctor." "Alaska, my mom was already praising him a lot." "Yes, all right. What do you say?" "Thank you. What if I really wanted to send my father to the afterlife?" There was silence at the table. Then Jessica took his hand. "You couldn't. You're good." Everyone somehow relaxed. And Clara looked at Archie and realized more and more that here he was. He was here, only he wouldn't recognize her, and no one would say whether he would. That same day, Bucky took Archie to the hospital. They didn't arrive until the evening. But he said that he would call back tomorrow. They were doing some tests on him. Clara sighed, and Alaska smiled. "Why are you sighing? Everything is going to be all right." "I know it is. Everyone was waiting for the doctor's call. But when he called, there was a real panic. Finally, everybody sat down around Bucky. While he talked, the housemates tried to catch every word. Bucky hung up, but that it was no big deal. Archie had once had a trauma. Maybe he'd been through some kind of trauma along with it. That must have been what triggered his brain to block out everything he saw and knew. He said no surgical intervention was necessary. We need to try a therapist, but not the fact that it will help. The fact is that people with this kind of memory loss may never remember anything or may remember everything in an instant. It can happen at any time. Well, or it might not. Clara clutched her head. So Archie could always be like that without a past. Bucky nodded, and Alaska suddenly said, "Maybe it's for the best. After all, you can start all over again." Archie looked at her. "Is that an option? Only now I still want to know what really happened." A day later, Clara and her daughter were getting ready to leave. They all went outside. Archie was depressed. He had already realized that he had something with Clara. He liked her madly, but he tried not to show it. Who was he? A bum from the dump, and maybe even a criminal. But she was so beautiful and smart, and her Jessie was wonderful. They stood at the gate talking. Clara looked around. "Where's Jessica?" "She was just here." "Clara saw her a minute ago." Alaska said, "Maybe she had forgotten something." She looked at the door, and at that moment there was a heartbreaking scream, a girl and a big dog barking. My God, it was the neighbor's Rex. Alaska went pale. Archie waved through the fence in a second. Clara ran along the fence. Alaska and Bucky followed. The neighbor's gate was open. Apparently he had gone somewhere. And there was a huge dog in the yard. Clara wanted to scream, but at the same second Archie swooped down like a kite on the dog. Jessica rushed to run. Clara picked her up and carried her out of the yard. Bucky rushed to Archie's rescue. Somehow the two of them fought off the dog and slammed the gate. Archie had blood on his hands, his head. Bucky looked at him as he was alarmed that Archie was smiling all over, still sleepy, but smiling. "I'm fine. I didn't want to kill my father. I just wanted to talk to him, but he decided to get rid of me." "Do you remember everything?" Bucky looked at him dumbfounded. "Everything, absolutely everything. And Clara, too." "Bucky, can I ask you a question? Can't you see for yourself? She looks just like you." Archie almost burned. "Bucky, I have to go into town without them. Let them stay with you one more day. Is there someone who can help you?" "Yes. It's a reliable person. Besides, I have money in the safe deposit box. I don't have any paperwork. Just a question. Let's not say anything to the women yet." Bucky smiled, and he likes you, Archie. "Okay. Especially since you might have to get some stitches." Clara and Jessica stayed behind. Even though Clara asked to go with them, she couldn't help it at the hospital. But Bucky was adamant. "Do you think the doctor can't do the stitches without you?" "But Clara, let us do it ourselves." Clara didn't understand what had happened, why she couldn't go with them, and why do they have to stay here another day. They would have to go to work again. Archie's eyes still bothered her. Not the way they had been a few hours before. More mature or something. The naivete and kindness was gone. But then Clara decided that a dog bite was not a mosquito bite. "How else should he look?" As the men drove away, Alaska asked wistfully. "Did anything seem strange to you?" "What are you talking about, Archie?" "Did you notice the look in his eyes, too?" "That's it. Something our men are up to. And for some reason I thought he remembered everything." "What do you mean?" "He didn't remember. And then, just like that, he had an epiphany." "I don't believe in such miracles," Clara sighed. "You're probably right." They spent the whole day waiting. But by evening the men had not returned. Alaska, kept dialing Bucky's number, but no one answered. Finally, when they were on the verge of hysteria, Bucky called himself. "Did you miss it there? Bucky, where are you?" "I'm going crazy." Bucky's voice was funny. And that pissed Alaska off even more. "You don't have to go crazy. You know, in your condition, it's not good for you. Bucky, you come here and I'll beat you to it. I promise you that." He laughed. "Don't, Alaska. You and I have a wedding to witness. Just don't say anything. Set the table for real." "The table? I don't understand it." Alaska, you'll find out in a minute. We'll be there in half an hour." Alaska ran around like a robot for half an hour. Clara tried to ask her anything, but Alaska just waved her off. "Help, come on. The men are coming. I don't know anything myself. I'm sorry. I had to put up with it." Alaska, she's like that. If she doesn't want to say anything, she won't say anything. Not half an hour later, a car stopped under the window. Clara jerked toward the door, but Alaska stopped her. "Too much honor. They'll come themselves. You should have picked up the phone." The door opened, and men piled into the room. Archie had a huge bouquet in his hands, and the man himself was unrecognizable. Fancy clothes. Fancy haircut. Clara looked at him with her eyes wide open. There were 5 or 6 bottles of champagne in Bucky's hands. Clara slowly sank down on the sofa. Alas, so she was right. Archie remembered everything. "Well, hello, Clara." He took a step toward her, and Clara felt the tears run down her cheeks. "Hello, Archie." He handed her the bouquet and said, "I proposed to you a few years ago. It still stands. Marry me. Nothing has changed. I love you very much, even more than before, because we have Jessica in common now. Don't get me wrong, Jessica. She's been like family to me all along, when I didn't even know she was mine. Dad." Everyone turned around. Jessica had been asleep for a long time, but out of emotion no one thought to keep their voices down. The girl was awakened by the voices. She'd been standing there since the beginning of Archie's speech. He stepped toward her at once. "Jessica, I'll try to explain to you why I haven't been around for so long, but I'll try to be the best father possible to you." Jessica threw herself at him. "Don't. Mom said you just didn't know. You would have found me." Archie threw a grateful glance at Clara, who was already sobbing profusely. Alaska tried to reassure her, but her own tears were flowing. Bucky took the initiative. "Come on, stop crying. Let's go drink champagne." "Alaska, I bought you no alcohol." Alaska smiled. "Bucky, do you know how much I love you?" He thought about it. "I don't know." After getting a kick in the rib, he said right away, "But I'm guessing." At the table, Archie said, "I want to drink to all of you. If it weren't for you, I would have rotted away in a garbage dump without knowing who I was. But most of all, thank you to my daughter and the kindest and best person I know." After a while, Alaska said, "Now tell me about it." Archie threw up his hands. "There wasn't much to tell, so I went to my father to get him to do the right thing. That is, to confess what he had done. He said no, so I promised him I would tell him everything. He laughed and didn't believe me. And when I did, I was just beaten by my father's dogs and thrown into the woods, hoping I wouldn't survive. But I was different, and I made it to town. Really, I didn't remember anything. Toward the end, I declared, 'I love you all.' Night was falling outside.